Have you ever paused to consider, well, the intricate tapestry of human development? Why do some individuals, maybe even whole communities, seem trapped in certain cycles, while others manage to transform quite dramatically?
It's a really fundamental question, isn't it? It touches on everything from our closest relationships to, well, the broadest cultural forces shaping society.
Exactly. We often think of growth as something purely internal, just happening inside us.
Right, an individual journey. But the reality is much more interwoven. It's this constant dance between who we are and the worlds we actually inhabit.
Absolutely. And that intricate dance is precisely what we're diving into today. This deep dive explores Urie Bronfenbrenner's foundational bioecological model of human development, and crucially, how it's being reinterpreted and integrated into a really fascinating new framework, the Cognosystemic theory of human psychosocial relational construction, or TCCR, proposed by Jalan Simunovic.
By a mouthful, TCCR.
It is. But our mission today is to unpack how this integration helps us understand psychosocial reality, not just as, say, observable behaviors, but as this dynamic, multi-layered structure of narratives.
It really does offer a profound new lens on the whole human experience, I think.
So to really grasp Simunovic's reinterpretation, we first need a solid understanding of Bronfenbrenner's original model.
Definitely. It's a cornerstone. It basically paints a picture of the individual developing within this interconnected web of environmental contexts.
Contexts ranging from the really immediate, like your family, to the much larger, sometimes invisible structural forces out there.
Exactly. It's a map of our environmental influences.
Okay, let's unpack this web then. Bronfenbrenner organized it into several distinct but interconnected systems. At the very core, the heart of our daily life is the microsystem.
Right. This is your most immediate environment. Think direct interactions.
So family, close friends, school, maybe your workplace.
Precisely. The social and physical structures you have frequent direct contact with. It's where your daily life happens, and it profoundly shapes your cognitive, emotional, social development. It's really the foundation.
The layer you feel most directly, moment by moment.
And building right on that, you have the Mesosystem.
Okay, so how does that differ?
Well, the Mesosystem describes the connections between those microsystems. The key idea here is that influences spill over. They don't stay neatly in one box.
So it's about the interaction between, say, home and school.
Exactly. Think about parental involvement in school activities, or how a child's tough day at school affects their mood at home. Even how a good relationship with a teacher might positively influence family dynamics.
So these immediate worlds aren't isolated silos. They're constantly talking to each other.
They're interconnected. That's the Mesosystem.
Okay. Then we move outward again to the Exosystem. This is where it gets maybe a bit less intuitive.
It can seem that way. The Exosystem includes structures or settings that indirectly affect the individual. You're not directly involved in them, but they still influence your microsystems.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about a parent's workplace. Maybe new, demanding policies increase their stress. The child isn't at the workplace, but that stress definitely ripples into family life, right?
Right, or like a local government decision about funding for parks. That affects the quality of neighborhood play spaces, even if you never attended the council meeting.
Exactly. Or even mass media. The narratives and norms it promotes can subtly shape what's considered normal or desirable within your family or school.
So seemingly distant factors ripple inwards and shape your daily reality. Fascinating.
It demonstrates that wider context matters immensely, even when you're not directly participating in it.
And beyond that, the widest layer.
That's the macrosystem. This is the big picture. The overarching cultural values, ideologies, beliefs of the larger society.
So things like prevailing political ideologies, economic systems, deeply embedded cultural norms.
Yes. All those things that shape social policies, institutions. Think about how societal beliefs influence access to things like education or healthcare.
These are the powerful, often invisible forces that kind of set the rules for everything below them, so ingrained we might not even question them.
Very much so. They form the cultural blueprint, you could say.
And finally, running through all of this, time.
Precisely. The Cognosystem. This is the temporal dimension. Imagine it like a time-lapse video layered over all the other systems.
Showing changes and transitions over time.
Exactly. Both in a person's individual life, starting school, moving, loss, and within broader social and historical contexts.
So big events like wars, technological shifts like the internet, major social movements.
All of that falls under the Cognosystem. It underscores this idea of macro time, how huge historical trends fundamentally shape the experiences and narratives of entire generations.
Wow. Okay, so that's Bronfenbrenner's model, an incredible map of development and context.
It really is comprehensive. But here's where Simunovich TCCR comes in with this really insightful reinterpretation.
Right, so TCCR takes the same ecological architecture.
Yes, but uses it differently. While Bronfenbrenner mapped developmental processes and behaviors across these systems, TCCR uses this framework not just to map what we do, but to organize the narrative levels where psychosocial meanings are produced.
Okay, that's a crucial shift. From behaviors to meaning-making, to the stories we tell.
Exactly. It's about understanding how we make sense of our experiences within these different ecological layers and how those meanings, those narratives shape us.
This is where it gets really, really interesting for me. Because this core shift means each ecological system isn't just a setting anymore.
Correct. Each system is reconceptualized as a distinct narrative space.
A narrative space. What does that mean practically?
It means that within your family, your school, your community, your culture, these aren't just backdrops. They are active arenas,
right.
Places where individuals and groups are constantly creating their own stories, defining values, building structures of meaning.
And these narratives aren't static, right? They influence each other across the layers.
Constantly. They're in dialogue. The insight here, perhaps for intervention, is that if a community or individual is struggling, it might not just be about changing behaviors. It might be about understanding and maybe even helping to rewrite the collective or personal story that's limiting them.
That feels like a fundamental shift in how we might approach helping people or communities. Less about fixing, more about reframing the story.
Precisely. And the theory explains how these narrative systems are distributed across these hierarchical layers, but also in constant dynamic interaction. There's feedback.
Okay, feedback between narrative levels. How does that work? Simunovich talks about mimetic flows, right?
Yes, mimetic flows between layers, micro, meso, exo, macro. Think of mimetic like an internet meme, an idea, a story unit that replicates and spreads.
So these are the stories, the beliefs, the ways of making sense of the world, moving between and influencing these different narrative spaces.
Exactly. It's the transmission of meaning across the system.
Let's break down that feedback. How about upward feedback? How does a small personal story climb up the levels?
Well, think about a personal empowerment narrative. It might start with one person's transformative experience, maybe overcoming a significant challenge.
Okay, something deeply personal, micro level.
Right. But through sharing it, perhaps in a community group, it can resonate. It might become a catalyst for group change, a shared story.
And if that spreads further?
If that story resonates and spreads across other communities, maybe gets picked up by advocates or media, it could eventually influence public policy discussions or even start shifting broader cultural values. It scales up.
From the personal to the systemic. That shows individual narratives can be seeds for wider change.
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
But then there's the other direction.
Downward feedback, the big stories pushing down.
Exactly. This is the systematic influence of dominant or hegemonic narratives from the macrosystem level, shaping individual and group narratives lower down.
Shaping the content, how stories are told.
Both the content and the expression. Consider the meritocracy narrative, the idea that success is purely down to individual effort and talent.
A very powerful narrative in many societies.
Extremely. And it shapes how people in schools or workplaces understand success and failure. It often subtly downplays structural barriers or inequalities. It becomes a default lens.
So it can actually limit how people see their own situation or possibilities. If they don't succeed, the story says it's their fault alone.
It can certainly frame interpretations that way, yes.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful, often invisible shaper of our personal stories and self-perception. It's not absolute, of course, but its influence is significant.
Right. It's not absolute. Which brings us to horizontal feedback.
Yes. This is the exchange happening between narratives at the same systemic level. Think side-to-side influence.
Okay, so interactions within, say, the Mesosystem or maybe between different exosystem influences.
Exactly. This exchange can lead to collaboration, conflict, or shared transformations. A good example is the interaction between narratives of, say, conventional medicine and alternative medicine.
Initially often seen as opposing forces, right?
Very much so. But over time, through this horizontal feedback dialogue, research, patient demand, they've created spaces of interaction. Yeah. We now see integrated health models combining biomedical approaches with complementary practices.
So it's negotiation, maybe convergence within the same kind of narrative sphere, a dynamic give and take.
Precisely.
So connecting all this, human development isn't just biological or psychological changes. It's fundamentally a relational narrative phenomenon shaped by all these symbolic contexts, these stories.
That's the core idea. Our identity, our connections, even how we find meaning in life, these are actively co-constructed through this ongoing narrative interaction with our environment.
It reminds me of Jerome Bruner's work, how we constantly interpret and reinterpret experiences to form a coherent sense of self.
Exactly. It's an evolving, situated process.
Yeah.
Think about a young person figuring out their identity. It's not just internal thoughts, it's how their family's story about success, their peer group's narrative about fitting in, societal messages about gender or career paths, how all these shape their evolving sense of self.
Their identity is like a narrative they're co-authoring with their environment.
A constantly evolving narrative, yes.
So the big takeaway here, human narrative systems have immense power. They structure and give meaning to social reality.
They really do.
You mentioned Harari earlier. Our source material highlights his observation about cooperation, things like money, nations, laws. They work because we share stories about them.
Yes. Once these stories are collectively accepted, they gain this almost tangible reality. They enable incredibly complex social structures. It's the stories we tell ourselves and each other that literally build our world.
It's the operating system of society in a way.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And this leads to the fact that these narrative levels aren't always in sync. There can be shifts, tensions,
Friction. Intersystemic narrative friction. That's Simunovich's term.
Yes. Tensions between dominant narratives at different levels.
Yeah.
And importantly, this friction isn't always bad. It can be a catalyst for change and adaptation.
Can you give us some real-world examples? It feels like something we probably encounter often.
Absolutely. Think about an individual's personal narrative of self-determination, maybe learned in their family, their microsystem clashing with a macrosystem narrative that emphasizes state regulation for, say, social equity.
Okay, individual freedom versus collective good, perhaps?
Or imagine a school's narrative focused purely on individual effort and merit, clashing with a government Exosystem initiative promoting educational equity through resource redistribution.
Right. Different ideas about fairness or how success is achieved.
You also see it broadly in the tension between narratives of homogeneous national identity versus cultural pluralism in many societies. That struggle over whose story defines the nation is very real.
It's like when your personal belief, maybe follow your passion, clashes with a dominant societal narrative like get a stable, high-paying job. That internal conflict is narrative friction.
Exactly. That's friction between micro and macro level narratives.
And these frictions can lead to what are called hierarchical displacements, where stories rise or fall in influence.
Correct. A lower level narrative system might rise in prominence, or conversely, a dominant narrative might be displaced or silenced.
Can you give an example of a narrative ascending?
Sure. Think about narratives like labor rights or anthropogenic climate change. Initially, these often emerged at micro or meso levels, maybe small activist groups, local communities, scientific circles.
Right, not mainstream initially.
Not at all. But through persistent effort, evidence, social movements, they ascended. They gained support from institutions, governments, international bodies, eventually becoming part of the dominant discourse at the macrosystem level.
They climbed the narrative ladder, so to speak.
They did.
And displacement, a story losing its power.
A really clear example is the decline of the lifetime stable employment narrative.
Yeah.
For generations, particularly post-WWII in many Western countries, that was a powerful, almost assumed story.
One job for life.
Exactly. But it's been systematically displaced by narratives emphasizing labor flexibility, entrepreneurship, the gig economy. This reflects huge structural economic shifts, but it's also a massive rewriting of the career narrative for millions.
That's a profound shift in the story of work. So this integrated model, the TCCR, combining Bronfenbrenner's structure with narrative analysis. It seems incredibly useful for practice, especially in fields like social work.
Absolutely. The implications are significant.
How does it translate into practical help?
Well, it enables what Simunovic calls multi-local narrative analysis. It's a powerful diagnostic tool.
Multi-local, looking at stories in multiple locations or levels.
Precisely. Professionals can identify contradictions, blockages, or dissonances across various narrative levels: individual, family, community, societal. Instead of just focusing on an individual's behavior or internal state, they see how that person's story interacts with and is shaped by the stories at other levels.
So take that family struggling with job loss again. You wouldn't just look at individual stress.
No. You'd look at the family's narrative about work and success, the community's story about economic opportunity, or lack thereof, maybe broader societal narratives about unemployment or economic systems. Pinpointing where those stories clash or where they offer no hopeful path forward becomes key.
So it's less about just fixing a problem behavior and more about potentially rewriting narratives to open up different possibilities.
That's the core intervention strategy, yes. It provides a structure for designing more strategic, sustainable, and ethical interventions. The focus shifts to facilitating the rewriting of narratives, helping individuals, families, groups create new stories that are more empowering, adaptive, functional.
Connecting abstract meaning-making with concrete actions.
Exactly. Fostering individual and collective cohesion by developing shared narratives that make sense and offer pathways forward. It's about empowering people to become active authors of their own and their community's ongoing story.
Not just characters in a script someone else wrote.
Precisely.
So, bringing this deep dive toward a close, Bronfenbrenner's bioecological model gives us this incredible architecture of interconnected systems.
The structural map.
And the TCCR reinterprets that architecture through the lens of narrative. It lets us place these powerful narrative systems within a dynamic, understandable, and operational framework.
It really does. It moves beyond just theory.
And this significantly enriches psychosocial analysis and intervention, especially in social work, when you say, offering a much more holistic, context-sensitive view.
Absolutely. It recognizes the profound interplay of stories at every level of human experience, from the most intimate to the most societal. It moves us beyond just looking at the individual in isolation.
We see how lives are embedded in this rich, constantly evolving tapestry of shared and personal narratives. So as you navigate your own life and think about the wider world, maybe consider the narratives shaping your reality.
It's a powerful reflective exercise.
How might understanding these multi-level, interconnected stories, the ones you tell yourself, the ones your family tells, the ones society tells, empower you? Empower you to interpret, maybe influence, perhaps even rewrite the script of your own experience.
Which stories are serving you well? Which might be holding you back?
Something to definitely ponder until our next deep dive.